Hello everyone, and welcome to this seminar on 2G and 3G sunsets and what it means for IoT connectivity. Welcome you all to this session. My name is Martin Whitlock and I'm the CTO at Telenor IoT. And I'm going to guide you through this presentation today, which is a little bit different maybe than many of our webinars, which usually have a tendency to look forward into technology to come and concepts to come. But this time today, we're actually going to look a little bit more backwards and some of the legacy technologies that we are planning to sunset. I think this is a topic that concerns quite a lot of you, at least those of you who have been around and deployed IoT or M2M solutions for quite a few years. And I guess you recognize the different generations of mobile systems that has been deployed in the industry over the years, starting with the first generation, which was mainly meant for voice only. But since 2G networks started to come around in the 90s, we have started to use the networks for M2M and IoT applications, and it has of course continued going forward as well, and maybe even just started to take off. We are now in a situation where operators around the world are rolling out 5G networks. So that's the latest commercial generation of mobile networks. But we also have still a number of the older technologies very much in play. But that's not going to continue until forever, and that is why we're here today to discuss a little bit about that. But before we get into it in detail, let me say a few words about 5G and what that is. It's as I mentioned, the latest technology that we're deploying. It's not available globally yet, but it's starting to pop up on regions and certain geographies. It's going to be used for a number of different things. First of all, I think it's important to recognize that 5G as technology is going to take the mobile broadband experience to the next level. We basically need to deploy 5G networks to get higher speeds, better capacity, and so on, not the least from taking advantage of additional spectrum that 5G can utilize compared to the old legacy networks. 5G also has a number of new functionality that can be used for critical communication, where you need really ultra low latency or high capacity bandwidth or something like that for a critical application that could be anything from remote controlling robotics or a lot of live video streaming without latency and so on. But maybe to some of us at least, one of the more important things is that 5G is actually the first technology, first G, that has been designed with IoT use cases in mind, meaning that it's in a sense optimized for also handling connected devices that are not handsets or laptops or other human devices. So this is a big change, I think, and something that will cater for really good use cases within IoT going forward. But we're not there yet, and at this point in time, I think adding new enhancements to our mobile networks also comes with the consideration of decommissioning legacy systems. And why do we need to do that? Well, first of all, we cannot just continue to add more and more and more on top of each other, because at the end of the day, it will be a very difficult situation for everybody in the industry to keep up with all this technology in parallel. We also need to free up spectrum. Some of the older technologies like 2G and 3G are deployed in very precious spectrum, often in lower frequency bands where the propagation of the radio signal is as at best. And of course, we want to use these spectrum assets as efficiently as possible. And here, refarming of spectrum comes in play. And for refarming to work, we also need to shut down the legacy networks. I think other aspects, I read the other day about an operator peer of us that has made an interesting observation that, take 3G for instance, it in this particular network, 3G technology constituted about 1% of the total data being transmitted, which is not surprising because most people are moving away from 3G, but it still consumed about 30% of the total power in the mobile network. And this is also an important aspect of generation shifts, that we make sure that we are utilizing both spectrum and environment and other assets as efficiently as possible as operators. So that is a little bit of the background why we do this. But how does it look? Where's the state of industry? How many networks are being prepared to be shut down? And as you can see here, this journey has started. Out of maybe some 500 networks worldwide, we have a number that are either already shut down, or they are in the progress of being it, or even so, mostly actually being planned to be shut down. And we're talking now about 2G and 3G networks. And I will get back a little bit more about the details here. So as we can see, it has started, but it's far from over. And I'm sure there will be more networks than this that are going to be planned also in the future for being shut off. But this is according to information we have right now. And the source here is GSMA, the industry organization that most operators and the primary vendors are somehow interlinked with. And digging a little bit more deeper, what are the networks that are being shut off or being planned to be shut off? And as I mentioned, we are talking about 2G and 3G networks, and looking at some kind of time plan here, how these networks play out. We can see that there are some networks that were shut off already before the 2020s, not too many though, and all of those were actually 2G. Looking at what's happening right now, 2021 last year and this year 2022, you can see that it's a lot of 3G networks that are being shut off, and not so many 2G. And why is that? Well, there are several different reasons, and they somehow are linked also to regional aspects. So it doesn't look necessarily the same in Europe as in Asia and other markets, for instance. And this is a lot linked to what kind of services we are using the different networks for. And it's hard to say generally that it's going to look the same on all markets and in all networks and so, but if you generalize a little bit, you could say that in Europe, for instance, we have primarily seen 3G networks being shut off so far, while in Asia it's actually the opposite. And one reason is that in Europe we have a not too old legislation actually, which says that automotive, all new cars that are being sold in Europe has to support e-call, emergency calls that notifies authorities if there's a car crash somewhere or something else has happened. And this standard is still based on 2G. And looking back, we have a huge installed base of 2G enabled IoT devices in the networks, and this is primarily the reason why we're sitting here today and having a webinar of the 2G 3G sunset, so that we can relate to this and start to prepare for it and make sure that we as an industry have a controlled transition away from 2G into newer technologies. In Asia, I think the situation is a little bit different. Maybe there hasn't been as many 2G dependent installations from before. Rather, 3G has been used for a lot of device installations, and with a better capacity and so on with 3G, it's more natural to keep that one for now at least. But I'm sure that these networks will be shut off over time as well. So, looking at geographies and regions, as mentioned, a lot of these networks that are either being shut off or planned to be shut off are in Europe. But as mentioned, most of them are so far on 3G, and 2G network sunsets are primarily being planned for around 2025 time plan in Europe. Looking at Asia, as I mentioned, it's primarily 2G networks that are being shut off first. And then looking at other regions, take Africa, for instance, we don't see too many networks at all being planned to be shut off. And I think there are different reasons for this, but one being that maybe the rollout of 4G and 5G networks are still quite early on in many regions and many markets in Africa. Plus, there's still a high installed base of feature phones, older handsets that are also relying upon 2G based services for financial services and other things that, of course, has to catch up as well with this transition into the newer network. So it looks a little bit different between different markets. And North America, I could mention, maybe they are actually quite early on when it comes to sunsetting 2G in its entirety, and we are expecting that to happen already next year in 2023. So they are very much already moving into 4G, and they have invested quite a lot, the operators there, in the 4G coverage over the last couple of years, and now deploying 5G full speed ahead. So I hope that we will have other networks available by that time that can take care of this, of the IoT installations, but something to keep an eye on. I think for any one of you who want to know more about this and dig deeper into the details of regional aspects or how it applies to your installed base, of course, it's a good idea maybe to reach out to us at Telenor IoT as well, your contact person within account management or something like that, and we can most likely help you a little bit understand better on a detailed level as well. So that was some information about the actual plans and how this is going to play out, and the key message here is it's going to look a little bit different depending on which region you're looking at. But what does it mean then? What does it mean to current installments of IT solutions around the world? And I think, first of all, 2G reliant applications, something, or actually it could include 3G there as well, but you need to understand now, if you're having an installed base out in the field that are only 2G, 3G capable and not capable of connecting to, for instance, 4G at the same time. This is obviously something that is in the risk zone of losing contact depending on market and timing going forward. So that is one of the really important aspects of this presentation and of recommended way forward now to start to do that inventory. Also, make sure to understand how you can make your installations going forward multi-network types, meaning that they can connect both to 2G maybe for coverage today, but also have the capability of moving into 4G and maybe even 5G applications over time, so that you can have this transition without having to replace solutions or hardware in the field. And then if you have things that needs to be upgraded, let you start to plan for that and investigate the cost and the procedure of how to do that and what you can get for it. So this, of course, then could mean that there is some headaches for some of you going forward, and I want to be clear on that. But I also think that being prepared and knowing about this as early as possible and start to plan for it, that's the best way of not ending up in a midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it, which is related then to the installed base that you have today. So basically, really do this inventory. Which of my products need to be upgraded and by what time frame? And that is, of course, a little bit of a puzzle to be made, looking at capabilities of installed base, where are they deployed, what is the plans for the operators on those particular markets in sunsetting and so on. And of course, as I mentioned here, we can help out as well. But do that inventory so that you have the playground mapped out for you. Maybe some of these devices have a challenge of moving into 4G, but it's not an issue because the lifespan of the device itself or the application itself is still not gonna last longer than the networks are gonna still be around. So that is also something that needs to be mapped out. Maybe there's a generation shift anyways gonna happen with within your installed base, and then it's probably a good idea to upgrade to other network capabilities in time with that generation shift. However, all the installations from now on going forward, I think, should have future-proof hardware installed in it. So it's a strong recommendation not to continue to build up a bigger population of devices out in the field that cannot support 4G or 5G networks. I think that is, of course, a key message here as well, that really start to do this. And that doesn't necessarily, unfortunately, mean that installing modems and the hardware that cannot do 2G is the best way forward either. That depends on your geography, I would say, because while these regional differences, as I mentioned, plays a role here. If you have a really global application and something that is expected to work on more or less all markets in the world, I think you still need to continue have support for 2G for best coverage on many markets, while you also need to include 4G at least, maybe some of the 5G technology as well, for coverage on other markets. So this is going to be a transition period where you as a global IoT player need to maybe support several networks at the same time. But once again, understanding this and having a little bit of look at the time span and life cycles of your devices will help, and then we can also, as Telenor IoT, maybe better guide you in the right direction. But ultimately, you need to adopt and maintain some kind of long-term perspective, even if you're deploying things here and now. That's the state of the industry that we are in right now. But even though there are maybe some headaches and challenges coming with this transition, I think it's also worthwhile noting that these networks I spoke about, the 5G networks that are actually from start designed for IoT applications, they also come with something good. And I'm talking then in the short term about LTE-M and narrowband IoT, which are two type of networks that are already being deployed to a pretty high degree, I would say, in many parts of the world. And they are specified as part of the 5G standard, but they can often be deployed on top of existing 4G infrastructure as well. So in that sense, they offer a good bridge now the coming years from applications that have historically been utilizing 2G or 3G technology, so that we can have a quicker footprint deployment rather than having to wait for 5G, the new radio that comes with 5G, to be deployed everywhere in the world. So that is a good thing. They also have a number of new features that I think to many IT applications will be very valuable. And apart from having better systems for repetition and other things that will help in the coverage sense, for the signal to reach maybe deep into basements and other remote locations where you still might have installed IoT devices. That is one of the benefits, but I think another one is for all the battery operated IoT applications. There's really good features in both LTE-M and narrowband IoT that allows for longer battery lifetimes and for the device to go down in sleep mode to preserve power and so on, meaning that you will be in a much better position to build long-lasting applications that are battery operated than you could do with 2G and 3G networks. So that is of course positive, and something that I also believe will be an important thing to take into consideration when you do this analysis, so that you also understand if there's even upgrades to your existing applications that can be done while modernizing your installed fleet, and maybe based on that launch even new IoT applications to try to reap some benefits out of the situation as well. I also want to give a shout out for some additional information that is to be found in some white papers that we have released. You can find the links here on the screen, or you can find them on the Telenor IoT webpage, or talk to your representative in our organization and they will guide you. But we have one on the differences between LTE-M and narrowband IoT, and then also a white paper that much relates to the webinar that we've had here today, where you can read more about what the 2G, 3G sunsets means for IoT connectivity. With that, I'm saying thank you to all of you who have listened in, and I hope that you've had some interesting findings from this webinar. And if you have further questions, don't hesitate to reach out, as I mentioned. Thanks for that, and have a great day.